Back with another car metaphor for you today, folks, because
Oh, no.
Carrie's so excited about car metaphors.
I gotta go.
No, I've got a different one. So we're actually building on a topic that we covered last week in last week's episode called the expert's blind spot. You can go check that out if you haven't heard it before. But we talked about this idea that demonstrating and claiming a high level of expertise is not sufficient to win deals. And actually, if you go too far down that path, you could claim yourself out of a deal, out of revenue, if you will. And I want to just focus on a couple of additional pieces to the puzzle that you need in order to win deals. You need expertise, but there's more to it. And here's potentially a helpful example. If I want to get in shape, who do I hire, Carrie?
Probably a trainer, maybe a dietitian.
Probably a trainer, probably a personal trainer. If I want to get in the gym, start doing things, probably a personal trainer. Do I hire a PhD in exercise physiology?
Probably not.
Who's the bigger expert?
Well, it depends what you mean by expert.
Who has more expertise in that domain?
Well, the PhD has more knowledge, I would say.
Okay, fair. Good distinction. But we can agree the PhD has more knowledge on the topic, has studied it more, has gone deeper in their research. Like all things considered, I consider them a higher level expert than the personal trainer.
Absolutely.
So then why am I working with a personal trainer?
Well, that's why I think I was making the distinction is that you want someone who has expertise in working with people, right? You want someone who has expertise in understanding the problems that, Joe, who just dragged himself off his couch to come in and work out. You want someone who understands the problem at that level versus someone who understands the problem at, an amalgamate level across a bunch of scientific papers. Because that's the person who's going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's theoretical knowledge and there's applied knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. And and this is not to discount, PhDs. I've got several in my family and they're all very smart, right? But we're dealing in theory, right? The PhD in exercise physiology is running experiments, theoretical experiments to find and push the boundaries on what's possible and what's effective, what works, what doesn't work. The personal trainer who's got, who's helped 100, 200 people get in shape, build muscle, whatever, they've got applied knowledge. Like they've got like street level knowledge, right? Like they can't tell you why this particular exercise works, but they've seen it work experientially several times. And I think it's a good metaphor for consultants to think about because as a client, I'm more comfortable with the person who has a demonstrated track record of results and can point to those results and has, really like street level knowledge of why certain initiatives or strategies worked more than the person who can intellectualize what's possible and what could work without really referencing tangible, practical results. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I want you to talk more about why, because it could be, someone could argue that you want the person who knows the most, right? And the only reason you don't have that person is that they're not working at your local gym. But I'm curious if both of those people were in front of you at the gym, why you would choose.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I want the person who knows the most if I consider my problem to be exceptional.
Yes.
Is that where you're going? Yeah, it's a good point. If I consider, we've talked about this, right? If I consider my problem to be so exceptional, so unique, that no personal trainer could possibly know enough about exercise to get me into shape because I'm just so unique. And maybe you are, right? Maybe you have some particular health conditions that are unique and that require a higher level of expertise. That's very possible. But that's when I want to find the higher level expert versus, look, if I understand and have the humility to know that the problems I'm facing are common problems, I might not have the expertise to solve them, but somebody else with the required expertise and experience working with clients like us, and this is where positioning becomes important, right? The more that you have experience working with clients who are like them, and they will completely disregard often examples of clients who are not like them, even if you solve the same problem, right? It's kind of like saying, it's like me going to the gym and saying, well, if you haven't trained a 40-year-old Canadian-born man of Indian descent, then I don't think you can help me. That's a
Mhm.
little bit ridiculous, right? But clients are like that, is they want to see that you've worked with clients who are like them. And so to the extent that they believe that their problems are common enough to be solved, they're going to double down on the person with the process, versus if they think that they're really unique and specific, they might look for more expertise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think it's important also to note here that what we're not saying is the person with the PhD, if we stick with our metaphor, can't be the person that the client wants to work with. And I want to say that out loud because a lot of the people that we're talking about, a lot of the consultants that we work with are that, right? PhD or not, they're the person with the most experience and the most knowledge. And it's not about the fact that you have it or you don't. It's about how you are applying it. And it's about letting those prospects see how you're applying it, that you're out there in the real world, that you are working with people that are, the same as I am. And so I think I just want to make that distinction because I don't want someone to think that they are, that we're saying they're too knowledgeable to have clients. That's not it at all. What we're talking about is from the client perspective, what they need to feel, what they need to see, what they need to understand for them to want to work with you.
Yeah, it also depends on what kind of business you want to build. Because actually, the truth is, both people can build businesses.
Mhm.
They're very different, right? So the PhD in exercise physiology, could they build it? Could they have a consulting offer around helping technology companies who are innovating via apps and AI on exercise and training? Could they consult and advise those companies? Absolutely. Are there fewer of those companies than there are random people who want to get into shape? Definitely, right? They're going to run a lower volume business where they have a target market that's smaller, but they're potentially one of very few experts that could support, and they're also not replaceable at all, right? So they're not going to build a firm, most likely, right? They're going to be a solo consultant who comes and advises at a very high level for a very small number of companies, and that's a viable path. There's nothing wrong with that. Versus the other person is going to have a bigger market, potentially more scalability, can replace themselves, can build a team. And the more we talk about it, I'd say no right or wrong answer, just some deliberate decisions around who I am and what kind of business I want to build.
Yeah.
I'll use myself as an example. I decided at one point that I wanted to build a program that could help a lot of consultants with marketing and business development. That's the equivalent of the personal trainer, right? Built out a process, built out a program, standardized it, hired coaches to help me deliver on it, and that's yielded a certain business, and it's good. I could have also made a different decision, and I may in the future. Who knows, right? That I want to go in and consult at a very high level for some really big companies and do something very, very specific, and I want to monetize that way. That's not right or wrong, but you can see how that yields a different business model potentially, right? And so I think the question to ask as an expert is, what's the right model for me given what I want to do and who I want to work with? And just to piggyback off of the last episode here, where we talked about, is expertise enough to sell services? To complete that equation, I'd say you need three things. You need expertise, for obvious reasons, right? Even the personal trainer has expertise. You need a process. We talked a little bit about that, but we can double down on it more. That is, you need to show me that you have a way of turning your expertise into a tangible business outcome or result for me. And you need trust. And you spoke about this a little bit previously in terms of, I need to believe that you're not out to just collect a check, and once the check clears, that's the end of it. I need to believe that you genuinely have my best interest in mind. I need to have enough of a relationship with you to genuinely believe that you want what's best for me, and I can trust your decisions as we work together.
Mhm. So let's talk about that a little bit because we talked about the first two at greater length. Trust is a little bit looser, right? You can sort of understand the nuts and bolts of how to make those first two happen. But let's talk about how to build trust.
I think first and foremost, counterintuitively, it comes down to having lots of opportunity in the pipeline. Because you know who I don't trust? I don't trust the person that needs the business.
Mhm.
And you might not tell me you need the business, but then again, if you're willing to start working with me right away at 40 hours a week, one can reasonably assume you need the business. And it also shows up in the conversations, right? If I challenge you or ask you difficult questions and you fold, and we had this conversation with some clients last week, I think they had a client that was challenging them in the negotiation, and they stuck to their guns because they understood that there's a right way to do this, and they wanted to make sure that they were being in integrity. And lo and behold, the client ends up buying, because clients do that. They will challenge you to see if you're really going to stick to what you believe is the right thing to do, or if you're a pushover. And when you need the business, it's really hard to not be a pushover. And that's where you lose a lot of authority and integrity in the mind of the client. So, there's lots to say about building trust, but I think the first thing is, don't put yourself in a position where you need the deal, because then you cannot act objectively in terms of what's best for the client. You will not behave or speak in terms of the client's best interest, because you have an interest in the deal that you can't ignore.
Mhm. And it's interesting, all of these things we talk about all come down to that always, right? Being able to work in the best interest of your client. And I think a lot of folks think that's what they're doing. They kind of, presume that, of course, that would be the case. But what we're talking about is really, truly examining why you're doing what you're doing. And you used the word integrity before, and I think it's the word that really drives this, right? Ensuring that you're working in integrity in a way that means you are, in fact, looking out for the client at all times, and knowing that then, of course, creates success for you. But it needs to be the thing that comes first if you want your clients, if you want your prospects to trust you.
Yeah, and I think this idea that you live and die by your results is really important. I'm not saying you should do what's best for the client because you care about the client more than anybody else in the world. Like, practically that's not true, right? You likely care about your own results more than the client's results. Like, I think that's just human nature. But your results are very much tied to the client's results. And that's the thing that you have to appreciate is, if the client gets results and the client becomes a case study and the client becomes a reference, that's going to enable all kinds of fantastic results for you. So even if it's self-serving, I want you to care about people, don't get me wrong, right? But even if ultimately you can come to a place where you acknowledge, hey, if I really put the client first here and I want what's best for them and they get great results, they're going to be a fantastic ambassador for me. I'm going to get a great case study. I'm going to get referrals, references. That's perfectly fine, because the truth is, the better their results, the better your results will be in the long run.